All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's call of the Crypto Mondays Collective. We've got a great featured guest with us today, Josh Schwartz, co-founder and CEO of Fordefi. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, thanks, Luke. Great to be here.
I'll turn the floor over to you in just a moment. Um, but first, I just want to say we just finished the fourth general meeting of the Decentralized AI Agent Alliance, and we had about 30 members on the call, and it's really an impressive group of people, and we're really, I think, going to make a dent in the industry, at the intersection of crypto and AI. And also for those in New York tonight, we've got a great Crypto Mondays Decentralized AI with Evan Malanga from Yuma, which is one of the bigger players. That's not the biggest player in the BitTensor ecosystem. And at the moment, it feels like BitTensor is the hottest thing going on in the intersection of crypto and AI. But we've, as I said, got a great guest with us. And so with that, Josh, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Awesome. Okay, let me just share my screen. Second. Yeah. Okay. We all see that?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Great. So yeah, so again, Lou, thanks so much for having me on. Quickly, just about me, I was a TradFi guy for most of my career. Was at Cantor Fitzgerald, a couple of hedge funds, was at Bloomberg for a number of years, and now I've been in crypto for the last just over 8 years, all within wallets and custody. So I started my career at BitGo, and then was the chief operating officer at Curve, one of the first institutional MPC wallets, which we ended up selling to PayPal and became the back end of all of PayPal's wallet infrastructure and the team that launched PYUSD, et cetera. And then we launched Fordefi just over 3 years ago. So, okay, so first off, for those who don't know who we are, so we're one of the leading institutional MPC wallets that is purpose-built for DeFi and on-chain applications. So a couple of just high-level KPIs. We launched the product, like I said, just over 3 years ago. We now have over 170 institutional clients. Some of them, the highlights you could see at the bottom of the slide. Our clients include everything from trading firms, asset managers, exchanges, protocols, tokenization players, and others who collectively are transacting over 10 billion a month on our platform on chain. As a company, we're backed by we've raised $28 million today. We're backed by some of the leading investors in the space, like Lightspeed, Pantera, Castle Island, Microsoft, PayPal, and some others. But sort of like maybe just to explain sort of what we do and why we're different and why it's important. I think maybe just to give a little history lesson on like the history of the institutional crypto custody landscape and how it evolved, I think may be helpful. This happens to also coincide with a little bit of what my career was like so far in the space. But in the beginning, for institutions, for security, there was really just BitGo. Obviously, either had your own retail wallets, which have concerns about having your private key in any one place, and BitGo was the first institutional wallet that leveraged multi-sig or multi-signatures to actually separate your one private key being in any one place, and instead had multiple, almost like I said, like nuclear launch codes where you have to have multiple people interacting and signing at the same time, and thereby can enforce policies, et cetera. And that worked when worked really well, especially back then when BitGo got started, when the ecosystem was a very Bitcoin-centric ecosystem, and multi-sig was, of course, supported natively on chain. But as we started to see Ethereum and other chains starting to take off, the need for, I'd say, like more flexible or robust custody solutions to enable fast but still secure transfers drove the market to other types of key management solutions like MPC, which has now become a bit of the buzzword. It stands for multi-party computation, which has been around in the field of cryptography for over 30 years. It enables people to like collectively compute an output without sharing their respective inputs. I like to always give the example in a very, very like quick version of this is like if let's say we all wanted to calculate our salaries, but none of us wanted to actually share our salaries. So how would we do this? So if we want to calculate our average salary, so what would we do perhaps is like, I would start with my salary, add some arbitrary number to it that only I knew. I would give the total of that to Lou. Lou would, of course, from that not know what my actual salary was, would add his salary, give it to Lisa. She would not know what either mine or Lou's because of this arbitrary number, for example, would add hers. We go all the way around. It comes back to me. Of course, I don't know anything because I just got a total of several salaries. I could remove the arbitrary number, and voila, it's just a very simple example that we can perform through mathematical computations. We can actually perform math together without knowing our respective inputs, right? Because I could just I could remove the arbitrary number, divide by the total of us, and we got our average salary. So it's a good example just to think about how you can use math in a distributed version. Of course, signing transactions on chain are doing the same thing. So they follow a signature curve, and so of course you could have these various shares that collectively can calculate the outputs and sign transactions, but actually never ever come together. And so this was the benefit of MPC. And of course, like there are some major players in this. Fireblocks is a good example of this. Curve, my last company, these were some of like the early adopters of MPC and as far as wallets. But these examples were really used at the time for like sending transactions between players and like what I call CeFi settlement, or you're either hodling your tokens or sending them to each other as far as trades. And then slowly we started to see in 2021, we started to see like the growth of DeFi and on-chain use cases, like beyond the early POCs of, let's say, CryptoKitties, et cetera. We started to see like real examples of decentralized access to yield, folks like Aave and Compound, liquidity like Uniswap, et cetera. And of course, they involve the use of smart contracts or code that could be created by anyone but enforced by everyone. And frankly, the early wallet providers, I'd say like they struggled to provide a solution for these, not because of anything about them, just that it wasn't built for that. Like that when they built their solutions, this wasn't the use case that they were protecting. They were protecting theft of the actual underlying private key and being able to transfer. I tell people that CeFi settlement, that like V1 wallet use case, is sort of akin to signing a check. Right? So your wallet provider is your checkbook. It gives you the tools to decide, who signs the check, how much you sign the check for, to whom can you sign the check, and then the check clears, the transfers over, and that's sort of it. And that's kind of how all the V1 wallets interacted. When you interact in DeFi and interacting with smart contracts, it's very different. I tell people it's like actually signing an actual contract. And for any of the lawyers who may be on the call, I always say like, they would say you better read the fine print. And of course, one of the biggest problems when you interact in DeFi and you're signing these smart contracts is if you ever take a look at the raw contract code, it's nonsensical for the average person. Like it would not be any way for us to actually know what it is that we're actually signing. And let's get like two quick stories about this. When we were first starting the company, there was like a very large OTC desk in the space who had told us that they signed a 9-figure transaction in DeFi completely blind. Right, like they really weren't sure what the contract call was actually going to do. And another good example was a trader at a crypto fund who told me that it's scary how easy it is for him to steal his fund's assets, and all he has to do is create his own dApp on chain and interact with that smart contract. That contract being a malicious contract that drains the wallet funds and just and sends them to his own private address. And he uses an institutional wallet, but that institutional wallet didn't offer any protections around interacting with these sort of like malicious contracts. And so we realized that if we were going to be enabling like true use cases of real world adoption on chain, we needed to build like robust institutional infrastructure that can support this. And that's what we built Fordefi to do. So just like very quickly, what does it mean to be purpose-built for DeFi? I think it kind of boils down to 3 main distinctions. First, we talk about is connectivity. So as we know, there are many chains now, like new chains keep popping up, each with their own dApps. Each dApp keeps popping up. And many of the early providers just did not have an easy way to enable users to connect to each of these dApps. So like, for example, those who know, of course, like MetaMask, the retail wallet, MetaMask had MetaMask Institutional, which was their first iteration of like enabling other institutional wallets to connect to EVM chains. And that's great for EVM, but what if you were doing something in Solana, Cosmos, et cetera? I like to tell people it's sort of like telling a TradFi user that like you have some platform to help you trade IBM stock, but if all of a sudden you want to trade Tesla, you need like a brand new platform. And this was actually happening. You had like VCs who, had some investment on another chain, and they were back to like having to have a Kepler wallet, which is a retail wallet, and back to the same limitations or security concerns, just because their institutional wallet didn't natively support interacting with those chains. And so we built our own browser extension from the ground up that connects to literally, I mean, any dApp on almost any chain. I'd say it's like over 97% of TVL right now. And so like just like high level, if a user is interacting on Uniswap, Jupyter, or Osmosis, like 3 totally different ecosystems, they have the exact same workflow, use the same extension, connect to Fordefi out of the box. And that's the first part. The second part is clarity. Like we mentioned, we give people the tools to actually make sure what it is, to understand what it is that they're going to sign before they sign. We translate, in a sense, every smart contract into like human legible format. We do things like simulate every single smart contract and show the user what the balance will be on their wallet, if they were to approve such a transaction. We maintain a dApp directory of thousands and thousands of addresses, thousands and thousands of contracts mapped to their contract name. And so we tell someone, if you're on Uniswap, it's not because you're on like you may be on Unisoap, and we'll tell you actually this contract is not Uniswap's contract, and we'll flag it as like you may be interacting with a phishing site, et cetera. And again, we give you, to that point, a lot of push alerts if you're interacting with potentially malicious contracts, as well as some other types of alerts. And then finally, controls. Any good institutional wallet, like we said at the beginning, can enforce certain policies, but most of those V1 policies were very much around transfer. So like if I wanted to transfer assets above a certain amount, maybe require people to approve, or if it didn't go to a whitelisted address, maybe reject it or require people to approve. But we're the only ones that give people the ability, users the ability, and I'd say like institutions the ability to define their governance controls that are DeFi specific. Maybe they want to say, a good example of this is like, if let's say a trader just wants to change their allowances on Uniswap for a particular vault to like $5,000, this may be something that the institution says at the beginning, they can do this on their own. We don't need to wake 3 or 5 people up around the clock to just stop this user from doing this. But if actually they want to interact on some non-whitelisted contract for more than a certain amount of money, maybe we would then all of a sudden want to have a more robust approval process. And so that's kind of what we talk about in controls. Another small thing I would just highlight in controls is, unlike V1 wallets where, like we said, like once you transfer the funds, you don't really care about it. In DeFi, these are your positions. You maintain positions on chain. And so you have to start thinking about things like perhaps like revoking allowances if there's a malicious contract, or triggering an unwind transaction in the event that there's something detected by like a third party. So we've built a lot of these tools, such as, for example, we integrate with Hexagate and Hypernative, 2 other on-chain monitoring tools. And we actually not just show you the information, but we let you say, for example, like, what good is it if you wake up in the morning and find out you were rugged, but then say, well, my provider actually flagged it for me. Here, you could actually tee up in advance unwinding transactions that kind of pull your assets out of a pool before something were to happen. So these 3 areas, connectivity, clarity, and controls, are sort of like the main differentiators for DeFi. I'd add here that like our wallet infrastructure is super flexible. So of course, everything that we just saw on the last slide, where you see the like it's all available in the UI, but it's also of course available programmatically. So we allow users, let's say exchanges or payment providers, et cetera, tokenization firms, to programmatically scale their operations with thousands of addresses instantly, setting policies that integrate like AML KYT screening, et cetera. But at the same time, and these are examples where, let's say, as a non-custodial wallet, that exchange, let's say, would be their own custodian, right? They use our wallets to custody assets, and then and can do that, both securely and at scale. But at the same time, we've also built what we call our wallet SDK, which is a really cool feature. It enables institutions to deploy those MPC shares as end user wallets as well. So a good example is taking that same example of an exchange. Sometimes the exchange wants to be the custodian of our assets. As we know, I put my assets, let's say, on Coinbase, and Coinbase is holding my funds. At the same time, when it comes to DeFi, a lot of exchanges have started to launch their own end user Web3 wallets, similar to like how Coinbase launched their DApp wallet. A good example of one of our clients, for example, is Pintu, where Pintu launched the Pintu Web3 end user wallet, where Fordefi MPC shares are actually deployed to the end user. So each end user actually has their own self-custody in their Pintu mobile app, and the transactions are being signed between the end user and Fordefi. I like to think about this. It's like why is my mother not yet in this space? And why doesn't she hold her own assets? I mean, aside from not really, like, anytime I talk to her about what I do, she doesn't understand it. But aside from that, she would never hold her own wallet, because she'd of course be afraid of getting hacked or losing her keys or getting a new mobile device and then what happens to it, et cetera. And so this enablement of having retail platforms enable MPC shares to their end users, it's sort of like, enabling self-custody with training wheels. And these are some cool use cases that we've started to see across some of the retail platforms. Okay, so as makes sense now, I'd say all the various flexible deployment schemes enables us to serve lots of different types of institutional clients. So of course we have the asset managers, whether those are crypto native funds or DeFi funds or VCs who want to deploy assets on chain. Some of the largest market makers, who are providing liquidity to a lot of these on-chain projects, to tokenization firms, everything from enabling the issuers, whether those are stable coins, treasuries, equities, et cetera, as well as actually helping those assets find their utility on chain. I'm actually speaking in a couple of panels in Toronto this week on RWA. It's what is the point, of course, of tokenizing real world assets? One of them is, of course, for in addition to transparency and fractionalization, et cetera, is also utility. And so enabling these assets to find their way on chain into DeFi is really valuable. I'd highlight that, for example, most of the pools, an overwhelming majority of the pools on Morpho are actually curated by Fordefi clients. So this end to end from the issuers to the users to actually deploying on chain are good examples there. Of course, exchanges and payments, like we just mentioned, both because of flexible and scalable wallet deployment use cases, are good examples of how we enable those folks. Something we just announced last week, which I think is super cool, is our standby wallet feature. And actually, I was just on a podcast with Castle Island talking about this. And the example I gave was actually back when I was working at Bloomberg, just over 10 years ago. The UK actually had to halt a treasury auction because the Bloomberg terminal was down. And it's actually crazy to think about, right? That that a country could not raise money because of the reliance on technology. Well, fast forward to our crypto markets where we are today, which of course are always on and always connected and all the benefits of crypto. But a lot of our activity as users and as institutions is very much tied to our actual addresses. And so if we lose access to our addresses, as a good example, if let's say a large wallet provider, maybe us or maybe one of the other large wallet providers, is actually down or inaccessible, right? So not talking about if they're hacked, God forbid, if your assets are lost. What if your assets are safe, but you just can't access your addresses? This actually would just stop institutional crypto. And so two good examples of this is think of an exchange that launches thousands of addresses for each user to deposit their funds, and then they lose access to move those funds into the exchange. Exchanges can't operate anymore, or funds and market makers who use daily settlement instructions. If they couldn't settle transactions, these things just sort of stop. And so we were actually the first provider to enable users. It almost sounds like magic upon magic, but to import other MPC keys into our platform without compromising the security integrity of that wallet's MPC shares. And so you'd actually be able to like keep operating your existing wallets. And so we did this in partnership with Station 70, which is one of the leading backup recovery providers in the space. And it's a really, really cool BCP feature that frankly, like every institution should have and should use to just make sure that like, if for whatever reason their wallet provider was down or inaccessible, they continue to have always on control from their actual addresses. And so just like finalizing, I just say, in terms of like what's next for us or some of the things that we're focused on. So I'd say like first off, like we're always thinking about ways to unlock new workflows on chain. And one of them I think is really cool is with what we've launched with our collaborative wallets. If you think about it, an institutional wallet kind of has like three main components. You have like the key management layer, the policy or authorization layer, and the fact that we're hosted so we handle like the transaction lifecycle, pushing transactions to chain, monitoring for status, et cetera. Well, if you take some of the first two components, like admins, policies, backup keys, these actually could become pretty modular, and you could think of really interesting use cases where different users from different institutions can hold different parts of these and enable really cool collaborative use cases, like, for example, self-custodial tri-party settlement, which before this needed regulated custody to like hold it and enforce on behalf of other people. Here now you could actually have like really cool use cases where three different people come together, each holding required approvers or required shares, and you can enable tri-party settlement. Another good example, we've had some hedge funds where the LPs actually want to be their own custodian. They don't want their hedge fund to actually be their custodian. So the LP wants to have their own custody, but empower the hedge fund, the investment advisor, to transact on its behalf. And so you have like almost like true SMAs that can be done securely via MPC. So that's like one cool thing. And then the other thing that we think about is, as DeFi continues to get, I'd say, more complex. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way, but like as more chains come on and we see more increased fragmentation, we do have to be thinking a lot about those who are not yet in the space, but are obviously going to have no choice but to adopt a lot of the use cases in DeFi. Think of like traditional asset manager who's going to say, I have like USDC on some chain. I understand I may need to do bridging and swapping and something. I just need to get yield here and help make this like super intuitive for me. And so we're working on a lot of tools to have like to simplify, I'd say, from like security, UX, and price discovery to enable sort of those new market participants. And then, just summarize, like, again, thanks again, Lou. I really appreciate the time to give an overview. I know this is a lot. I'm happy to answer any questions. But also I just say, like, if anyone wants to like have like a deeper discussion, of course, you can reach out to us anytime at fordefi.com or email us here at sales@Fordefi, and happy to take you through it.
Okay, terrific. Thanks a lot. There was a lot of information there.
Yeah.
You want to stop screen sharing?
Yeah, sure.
So I did not see Unisoap as a customer. One of the interesting, so you were talking about collaborative wallets at the end. I was assuming that was going to go to like agentic commerce. Have you started to think about letting AI agents leverage the wallets?
Yeah, totally. This is definitely an interesting area. I think it's a combination of two things. I think between collaborative wallets and the second part of actually creating like a more intuitive, integrated DeFi workflow can actually start to create a landscape where AI agents can actually sit on top of our platform, and users can just like securely, allow whatever amounts of, to using the policies, et cetera, whatever amounts of control that they want.
Yeah, I mean, right. If you're letting said like an our AI do that for folks or hedge fund managers, you were saying.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, because you've had such an interesting seat, can you talk about, from your view, kind of how kind of the, institutions have evolved, that you've been working with, how kind of the whole institutional side of our industry has evolved over the last few years?
Yeah, sure. I joke about it. I think I may have said this to you, Lou, when we were in Tel Aviv, But when I first got in the space when I was working at BitGo, we defined an institution was like, anything more than two guys in a garage was already an institution in the space. So yeah, and we used to sit on these panels and they would say sort of like, when are the quote real institutions coming, et cetera. Yeah, I think, I mean, now we're at a very different place. We talk about asset managers, there's like crypto native funds and there's like Van Eck who's using us as well, right? Like, so, I think we definitely start to see across a lot of, there are definitely still some folks sitting on the side, I'd say over the course of this year, waiting for some final regulatory clarity that's expected to come with some of the bills that we should see later this year. But yeah, I think like, it's like it's night and day from where we were 8 years ago and the players in the space. Yeah.
You talked about being, purpose-built for DeFi. Can you just talk about too the evolution of that? And then if anybody else has a question, feel free to raise a hand. We'll take them for received.
Yeah, so and like I said, it actually came about for us. It came about at the end of our time at Curve. We started to see the early adopters of DeFi that were interacting. It was very very early for us to sort of see that like this is the direction. I always used to joke, but like people would buy the tokens of these various either protocols, and they would say like, could you imagine what would happen if these chains were actually started to be used for things? Well, now they actually can be, right? Like, and so it was like this inevitability that we realized that like all roads lead to DeFi. And I'd say this even, by the way, from like from a institutional perspective. Look what happened over the course of last year. We saw ETF approvals. And so now that was like the dipping the toe in the water for a lot of folks with like an instrument that they were much more comfortable with, right? So getting some exposure to the space. But eventually what happens is you see corporates that are put on their balance sheet. The natural next step is to say, oh, can I stake this asset? How else can I earn yield? And next thing you know, like everyone is sort of full on. You talk about like the big push right now around stables as like really cool use cases for efficient payment. But like I always say, like, why would I or why would we hold, billions of dollars in stablecoin payments if we're not going to earn yield on it, right? So eventually, again, you're back to the same DeFi implications. And so I think like all roads eventually lead to actually utilizing on chain. And so that just comes back to the same security concerns we have to solve for.
Makes sense. The way that you described MPC to me sounded very much like zero knowledge proof.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely similar. And I'd say like in general, the same class of areas. Yeah, where effectively we can get comfortable interacting with each other without actually having to show.
What's made me think, because I hadn't really thought about it before, because I know zero knowledge proof came out of Hebrew U and Jerusalem in 1980. You said MPC has been around for a long time. Where the history of that is?
So it's been around for the last, well over 30 years in academia. I think one of the, and I would just like caveat this by saying like, I am by no means the cryptographer on our team. My co-founder Dima is, but yeah, I mean, one of the limitations around it were kind of left it very theoretical for many years was because of just it was too computationally intense. Like it would just take too long to do it, that like it didn't have any more practical applications. And definitely, it's not a surprise that you start to see, I should say about Fordefi, that like my two co-founders are I'm based in New York, like we said, but my two co-founders are in Tel Aviv, and the majority of our R&D team is there. It's not a surprise that a lot of the innovation happening in MPC came out of Tel Aviv. You have, Fireblocks, which was an MPC provider, our last company, Unbound, which Coinbase bought, which was their MPC play, was an Israeli company as well. And I'd say like a lot of that did come from some stuff that they were doing in terms of innovation in the intelligence units in the army, et cetera. And so a lot of these folks came from the same areas and then sort of like found this way to make it more computationally, usable, and therefore hence usable commercially.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. So again, open up. Anybody has any questions? I would think Andy Singleton would have a question. Yep.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on what you're calling collaborative, which I would call controlled delegation, and how I can follow up on that and use that. What's the next step? I'm building the same thing out with lit wallets right now, which are, there's pluses and minuses to that, as part of my, AI trading workstation. So I'd like to learn more and get the instructions.
Yeah, sure. We should totally connect if you want after, and we could have a chat on it. Yeah, we call it we call it collaborative. You can also call it, it's like, if you go back I always joke, but this a lot of people call it non-custodial wallets, right? Okay, like most non-custodial wallets are actually not non-custodial. They're actually self-custodial wallets. Our iteration of collaborative wallets can actually be defined as like, quote, non-custodial, where no one player has the ability to like unilaterally move funds, right? Like, we call like, Fireblocks, BitGo in their non-regulated custody version, Fordefi, et cetera. We call us like non-custodial wallets, but it's actually our clients have the unilateral ability to move funds, and we do not have enough MPC shares or material to actually move funds without them. That's why we are not regulated. We are just a technology provider. I tell people it's like we are not the bank. We just provide the vaults to the bank for them to custody their own assets. But actually, when you do separate things like backup key recovery policies, admin required to change policies, et cetera, you can actually come up with some interesting configurations where no one player can actually unilaterally move funds. So you actually do have like true non-custodial setups.
Answer your question, Andy?
Yeah. So how do I get in touch with you, I guess, or your guys?
Yeah. So we can certainly connect. Like if you want to just ping me, easy, it's just josh@fordefi.com, and we can set up a call. Yeah, I would love to.
Okay, cool. Also, Josh, what are you seeing like geographically, around the world?
Yeah, good question. Across, like, first of all, like and maybe this makes sense. Also, like our go-to-market team is like distributed geographically because this is where we see it, right? So I'd say right now we're probably it's actually like pretty evenly split. I'd say it's probably 40-40-20 as far as like America's APAC and EMEA. And that may just be because we took like at the beginning a much more focused, deeper DeFi focus, and so we started seeing a lot more use cases like where the DeFi funds were more in both APAC and Americas. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's pretty well split geographically.
And what about Middle East? You say EMEA?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Dubai's been super hot. Yeah.
And Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. So far, as far as our clients today, it's more Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Dubai than the others. But like, yeah, it's everything from the regulatory to tax, et cetera. It's like very conducive for folks to be building out there.
Yeah, and not to mention, I'm sure you saw that Disneyland's opening up a park in Abu Dhabi.
Nice.
Yeah.
I see a Crypto Mondays happening there.
Exactly. Charles?
Hi there. Hi, Lou. Hi, Josh. Thanks. That was great. Just out of curiosity, I love the map with all the pins on it. I'm calling it from Brazil, where I live. I didn't see any pins in Sao Paulo or anywhere in Brazil. Have you got anything going on there?
Yeah, so the pins were only in terms of where we actually have team members domiciled, not where we have clients or engagements. So like, yes, 100%. Our LATAM sales effort is led out of El Salvador, but yes, we 100% are engaged with firms out there as well. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. No, because Brazil's a huge crypto community. It just doesn't, it often is sort of rather isolated, it doesn't necessarily interact with the rest of the world. But thank you for that.
Awesome.
Hey, Charles, we got Crypto Mondays Panama coming up.
Well, that's amazing. But hopefully we'll have our second Crypto Mondays Sao Paulo in early June.
Exactly. Terrific. Okay. We'll again open it up, see if anybody else has any questions before we let Josh head out. Going once, going twice. Okay, cool. Josh, that was terrific. Really, thanks a lot for taking the time. I know I learned a lot, and look forward to seeing you around on the circuit. but probably in the next few days.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
See ya.
Take care.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay, cool. So I'd mentioned George, were you on the Dia call in the last hour?
No, I wasn't able to make it. I
Okay.
just read the report I've received.
Yeah. But yeah, because we talked a lot about you.
Okay.
I
Good
assumed
thing
you
I
weren't
hope.
there.
No. But
Uh,
anything you would like to point out?
Yeah, well, no, you can read through. No, I mean, people were interested in Delhi. Delhi's not here. But
Okay.
Delhi talked about you, so then people started following up with Delhi, asking additional questions.
Okay. I'll speak with Dell then to follow up. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Anybody else on the
Cool.
call gonna be in Toronto? Once, twice? Nope.
All the
Yeah,
FOMO. Wish I could be
together.
there.
Uh,
Yeah, like there's people up there right now. We're gonna have a call at 2:30 p.m. for the Vegas crew. But they're in Toronto right now, actually.
okay,
Yeah,
cool.
Toronto really snuck up. It's a shitty timing, I think.
Yeah,
Is what it is.
they've been talking
For
about
me, anyway.
Toronto forever. I thought it already passed, but it's just it always seems to be a week away, and it's finally this week.
It is the easiest city from New York to fly into.
Totally.
Fly into that little airport, and then it's like literally I walked 20 minutes to I'm sitting in some 44-story.
Yeah, don't go to the Toronto International Airport. Just fly to the one that's in the middle of the lake, and you're
Exactly.
5 inches away from everything.
Yeah. So cool. So anybody else have anything that they want to mention, bring up, ask, highlight, vent about? Going once. Anybody who was on this, as I mentioned, I thought it was a super interesting Dia call today.
I missed that one.
Can you,
Lou.
Lou, would you mind for the group just summarizing real quick what happened in the Dia call today? I missed it too. I missed most of it anyway.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm on that thing. I would love to be added to it as well. I don't think I saw it on my
okay,
calendar.
sure, Matt. I'm sorry if you weren't, because
I'm joining with Brittany, so it's all good.
I thought I had added you, but I will go. I'll go make sure I do that. Well, first I got to say, I mean, for me the highlight is always when people introduce themselves, because it really is just a super impressive group of people. And then the subgroups, are also, doing some really interesting things. I think, the Adam Miller, who's heading up the legal subgroup, he went through all this, these prompts that they're writing, they want to kind of write the definitive, research on, for them all to use on kind of all of the legal issues, surrounding, decentralized AI agents.
Yeah, we actually want to be able to give people answers. And make that, and that's the big push of that committee, is to be able to give people ready, easy answers, and maybe even make an AI agent that does that. Because a big vibe of it is that attorneys get just blasted by fearful questions about AI and AI agents, and having quick, easy answers that sort of indicate that it's a tool that you must be very careful with, but not like it's going to kill you next week.
Well, according to my AI agent, they're not going to kill you for at least a few weeks.
Yeah.
But cool. Yeah, you've been participating in that, obviously.
How to use AI tools for legal questions, for example.
No, but I mean, it really is something. What I like, I mean, all the subgroups I think are making good progress, but really that seems to be like really well defined. What the legal subgroup is trying to achieve.
Is there a cybersecurity subgroup?
There is not. Here, I will actually put into the actually just yesterday, just ahead of the monthly meeting, I just said, you know, we just had our 3-month anniversary since we announced it, the formation with 30 founding members. So I wrote a blog post. I'll drop it into the chat right here. So, I mean, it's just a few minutes long, but you can see there are 8 subgroups now, and none of them are cybersecurity. So that would be a great one to start, obviously. I mean, that obviously crosses over everything.
Yeah, I have a yeah, definitely. I have a Portco that's doing like AI agents for like smart contract auditing. So they're like first pass, all that kind of stuff. And so I've just been delving into some of that world, and that's why I figured I'd ask and thought it might be a fit for the space to add value there.
Okay, which of your emails? So I've got a
The Disinternet is great.
and a Disinternet. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Cool. And anybody else? Anything they want to bring up? Going once? Twice? Okay, then we'll finish it early. Happy Crypto Mondays, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Bye.